All right. So we're recording.
Yeah, so I was just talking about how I have this habit pattern where that gets triggered in certain situations where like I get nervous or anxious and then like my mind becomes dull and I just try to like escape from the situation internally. Um, I know I didn't notice this before, but this time I was watching my breath. I noticed that it almost completely disappeared. Like I couldn't feel it at all anymore. Um, so then I tried experimenting. I tried taking deep breaths. Started taking deep breaths, and suddenly my mind became more and more awake. And yeah, everything changed. And then I enjoyed myself after that. So that was a big deal for me.
Yes. Not only is that a big deal, but you see, you've actually experienced what I have talked about. Tell every student about this. It's well known. It's well known within the deeper parts of the Sangha. It's well known by the neuroscientist, and it is available to be known by any practitioner. But a lot of people, they just take that as informational or as a concept. But you've seen yourself do that,
Yeah,
and and that's what's called insight. Oh, I'm actually seeing that I'm in shutdown mode.
like before I used to notice that I'm going in, but like I used to just try to talk myself out of it or something like that. But like the breath is like a concrete tool that you can just apply right then and just bring yourself out basically.
Yes, and um, because we use the breath, um, the coming out of it is actually using that breath or the oxygen that you're getting from the air in that breath to oxygenate the blood, to oxygenate the body, and also to oxygenate the brain.
Mhm.
Because when you stop that breathing, it means that the brain has gone into an automatic shutdown mode. And in a way, it's almost like that the modern aircraft is on autopilot,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden, the captain wakes up to the fact that the plane is heading straight down like that on autopilot,
Yeah.
losing altitude. So, have to take it out of autopilot and then manage the plane yourself. Well, now that you've done that and seen that one time, that's going to start building your confidence. And that every time that you see that happen, you're going to be able to catch it easier now. This is like the first time you've caught it.
Mhm. Yeah.
You've almost caught it before, but
Yeah.
this time you actually caught it, and that's going to build confidence. That's when Shraddha really takes over. That's when now, um, instead of having the eradication of doubt that this is the right path, that this stuff works, that's no longer a concept. Now this is real solid evidence.
Mhm.
And that's what is meant by insight, that you're seeing deeply into this, how valuable it is to remember to start taking a deep breath or two when you get into a tight situation. And I
Yeah.
won't even define tight. We'll just leave tight as a very general term.
Actually, work when I see uh that I'm about to get anxious or I'm about to get angry, uh, like I can see that now, and I start to take a deep breath and do it. But like if the situation gets like really bad, I escape to the washroom and then I take my deep breaths and get into a satisfied state, and then I come out, basically. Uh,
All right. Well, now you have a really excellent tool for your whole life.
yeah,
All you have to do is to keep remembering to do that.
yeah, yeah.
And that remembering to do that is a skill to be developed. In fact, um, about the tightest situation that anyone can ever get into is to be confronted with great danger, great physical danger. Like somebody's got a gun, a pistol pointed directly at your forehead while you're tied to a chair and he is screaming at you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, okay, so that's a pretty tight situation. That's a good time to really start breathing correctly.
Hmm.
Or if you're a CI agent, then learning these techniques would be good in case you get into a situation of torture. That nothing frustrates a torturer. See, they're going to do whatever they can do to you. But if you can frustrate them in the act, then they'll be a little bit harder on you right then, but then they'll get exhausted and they won't know what to do. So ultimately, if you can laugh at your torturer in the sense, all right, do your worst. And that's available rather than going into short shutdown mode. When I was a teenager, there was a wall, actually, it was just wall art, a glossy poster that I noticed that a few kids had. And that poster was a giant bird, probably an eagle, in flight, just landing with his talons out, catching a mouse. But the mouse is not running away. The mouse is turned and showing a great big finger in the air. So in that case, the mouse was a lion. You see, we are all going to die.
Yeah, that's true.
And so basically, uh, not only are we going to die, and we know that we're going to die, and that's a fairly traumatic situation for almost everyone. It's the most traumatic situation. We kind of put ourselves through that in dress rehearsal. In other words, we pretend that what is not dangerous is really dangerous, and then we go through the routine of shutting down and preparing for death. And
So,
that's exactly what that stop breathing stuff is. It's almost like here's an example of that. When the wolf goes into the rabbit hole and is actually able to get the rabbit, whatever he's got a hold of that rabbit is not the whole rabbit. He does not have the whole rabbit in it. He's just got a little piece of that rabbit and he's pulling it out. One of the things that really happens, and this is interesting, I've seen videos of this, is that the rabbit, once he's caught and is pulled out of the hole, surrenders. If that rabbit was a Buddhist lion practitioner, if he was doing his meditation, he'd be clawing the nose off of that off of that fox or the wolf. He'd fight back, but they don't. For something that's built into the system that we go into shutdown mode in preparation for death, rather than saying, "Oh no, you don't. I'm going to get out of this. I am
mhm.
not going to be stuck in this um, mouth of this, or the clutches of this eagle." And so this is one of the reasons why we want to look at why would the Buddha refer to himself as a lion, and that everyone went along with that and agreed that that was the standard thing. And it's almost like that he was more referred to as a lion than he normally was referred to as the Tathagata or the Tatata. The word Tatata actually is the Pali word which means be here now, or it's wrongly translated, but it's an indication. It's translated as thusness or thisness, or we don't even have an English language word for it, but we've got some really beautiful phrases, like Ram Dass comes up with "be here now,"
Mm.
and Eckhart Tolle has the term "this present moment" or "here now." All right, and that's what the Buddha called himself, but he was also referred to as a lion. And the quality of this lion then is one who can be here now, and that's exactly what you were doing. In that point, you had woken up. That was your enlightenment. That was the knowledge that you can come out of those woeful states.
Yeah, it was great. It was,
That instead of going into that shutdown, that we can take a deep breath, we can get our wits about us, and then we can do whatever is needed to be done.
Mhm.
Now, ultimately, we are going to die. Nothing that we can do about it. The question is it going to be a woeful accident? Is it going to be well known, well planned, and well executed? You see, in Western culture, there is a taboo almost. It's not just a big no-no. It is a taboo to commit suicide. It's also a
Yes.
taboo uh, uh, in the sense of um, most when people do it, generally the problem with suicide is that it's done by a young person who still have their family alive, and so they put them through a great deal of grief. But if you're already to the point of death, it's like, wouldn't you have rather have control over whether you're going to pull your own plug right now or somebody by accident kicks and then you kick the bucket? So um, the example that I would give in that regard would be that grandma is laying in the hospital. She's on all of this respiration equipment, and everybody comes on Sunday afternoon to see grandma. They planned in advance, and the grandchildren are there. I love you, grandma, and everything like that. They get better, and we're praying for you, and all of that kind of conversation. And then everybody goes home, and granny dies on Monday. And then everybody is sad and upset and unhappy and woefully saying, "Oh, I didn't get the chance to say goodbye to grandma. I was too busy telling her, hip, hip, hooray, you're going to survive." And granny was the one who knew that hey, this is it. In fact, I could have done it last week, but I waited for my party. So if people had not had that taboo and recognized this is the last time that they're going to see Granny, that she's actually going to die, she may be dead right here in front of us if we give her permission.
Mhm.
And now we can say goodbye to her and we can hold her hand and we can be there with her in her last moment. And everybody feels really good. And now the tears are tears of beauty and tears of joy and thanksgiving and all of that. But the normal way it happens is that people wind up in great grief
Yeah.
because Granny died and I didn't have a chance to say goodbye to her. I was too busy telling her I'm going to pray for her. And so, this is one of the very important qualities of, um, let us call it the noble student. The noble student is the one who is in the path of Sotapan, working towards the fruit. And that this is the point, because I'm going to actually give you the test now. Now that you know that you can do this one time, do you think you can do this again and again?
Yes.
That no matter what kind of tight spot or how difficult it is, you can take a deep breath, you can come out of it, and you can be here now. You can see the reality of the situation, no matter what. Is that right?
No matter what. Uh,
No matter what kind of tight spot you get in, you can take a deep breath, you can come back out of it.
I don't know. No matter what, I can't say that yet.
All right. Well, when you can come to that state of saying, no matter what, no matter how obstructed my mind gets and because of the situation, I can still take a deep breath, remember to come out of it, and be here now and see the reality of the situation. When
Mm.
you can come to that point, that is what the Buddha calls the first step of the noble path. That's the first knowledge. It's the very first thing that the beginning noble student, in fact, that's what makes the student noble, is because we're now have eradicated that doubt of no matter how tight the situation gets, I can breathe and I can come out of my bad feelings. Just because it's a woeful situation doesn't mean my mind is going to be in a woeful state. For instance, if I'm driving down the road, tooling at whatever speed is not important, and the cop comes up behind with all the and the swirling lights and all of that, almost everyone goes into panic mode.
Yeah.
Almost everyone goes into panic mode, especially if you're driving while black. And everybody then is in panic mode. The cop picks up your panic mode. He's picked it up 1,000 times. He's like an antenna. And so everybody really tense situation, no need for it to be a tense situation, but it has wound up being that way because people don't know how to be here now. I mean, after all, the cop is just a cop. If everything is cool, there's not going to be any problem, even if there's a fine. I can afford the fine. There's no big deal here. And
Yeah.
that's the reality of the situation. But oh no, when that cop, when we get pulled over, everybody goes into panic mode.
We're all gonna die. That's
Exactly. So these are the kind of situations you can begin to mull this over for yourself.
mm.
Thinking about what kind of tense situations would you get into that you would go into panic or shutdown mode or in some woeful state.
Yeah. I mean, for me, that happens pretty often at work, um, and like I remember how you said the truth will piss you off. Like I'm starting to see how deeply embedded in this stuff I am, and like I'm wondering how did it get so bad? Like,
All right. Well, here's the point that almost every student misses when they begin to see what you're talking about. Yes, the truth will piss you off, but knowing the truth now is marvelous.
yeah, it is.
Isn't it really magnificent that now you really know the depths of your own crap?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the only way that you're going to be able to see it. Because you see, if in fact the truth would set people free because you can see it, but generally it pisses people off, which means we go into denial. We don't want to see it. But now you're beginning to see the depths of your
Yeah.
own human suffering. And by seeing the depths of it, you don't like that at all. Oh my goodness, how how screwed up am I? But that's magnificent. That's the wake up. You're beginning to wake up. And when you get the confidence that you can wake up whenever a tense situation occurs, and in fact, you can plan on it in advance. One student that I have um, was saying that when he needs to or has to converse or talk with a workmate or a boss or something,
Mm-hmm.
that by the time that that conversation is over, he feels really tense and uptight, and he can feel it in his shoulders that he walks around like this after he's had a meeting with someone. So The idea then was is that, well, now that you know that, be prepared in advance. That before you actually start talking to the person, take a few deep breaths
Right.
and keep continuing to breathe, so that no matter whether somebody disagrees with your idea or it's the boss chewing you out or whatever like that, you can be really happy with it. Thank you, Mr. Boss. Wow, I'm glad you're being so honest with me. I'm going to make sure that we get this thing straightened out. Would be the right attitude.
Mm-hmm.
But how many people can take criticism like that?
Not many.
Well, this is a training.
Yeah.
The training is to be able to take criticism. Because if you can take criticism without going into a woeful state, then whoever's giving you criticism feels better about the situation. Because you know that you criticize people, and when they go into a woeful state, they get anxious, uptight, or they go into anger, or they start to pout, or whatever like that. Then, then by doing the criticism that precluded that situation, the criticizer will go right down in there too.
Mm.
And so it's not a good situation. And because of that, no one wants to offer criticism to anyone because it winds up being a lose-lose situation.
Yeah.
But you're a lion. You're going to claw the nose off of that wolf. You're going to shoot that eagle a bird just as he catches you. Are you going to say, "Hi, officer, how you doing? You having a good day today?"
Yeah.
So we find a way to remember. Actually, I've got another student calling in right now. Is it okay if I put him on the line with you?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Hello.
Hello, John.
How are you?
Everything is copacetic. Everything is nice. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Hi.
Hi.
Are
We're
you what?
sure. Pardon?
No, nothing. What are you guys up to?
Yes, you joined us on a call that was already in progress.
Oh, I'm sorry
Why?
because I interrupted.
No, you didn't.
No,
If I
no.
didn't want you on the call, I wouldn't have
Okay,
brought you on the call. I would have just not answered.
fair enough.
Well, what's your name?
So anyway, why don't you guys introduce each other?
My name is Juan, and yeah, what else should I say? I've talked to Dhammarato a couple times, and I want to know everything.
Hi, Juan. My name is Atharva, and I've actually seen some of your videos with Dhammarato. It's
Oh,
actually it's very entertaining for me. I like a
yeah?
lot.
Why?
It's because you ask a lot of questions. Like you cover everything. You know, a lot everything from different angles, and I like the responses Dhammarato gives you as well. It's
I've I watched Star Wars before talking to Dhammarato on Sunday, and I felt like Luke Skywalker talking to Yoda because I had like all these questions, and then like, what is this happening? And then he was just laughing at me with super simple answers. I'm like, I don't understand anything. So yeah, that was interesting.
All right. Well, you're welcome to join the call. We're talking about something that you and I haven't talked about at all yet. So if you just want to listen in on it, we'll continue on with what Arisa and I were talking about.
Yeah, that sounds
But
great.
But I was basically, he was talking about that he got into a tight situation and then he remembered to take a deep breath.
Interesting.
And to come out of it. That's in fact what this whole practice is all about. That's why sati is so important. That the first stage or the first step, the first knowledge that takes one out of the ordinary world into the noble world, that first step is the knowledge that no matter how tense the situation, or no matter how uptight I can get, or no matter how obstructed the mind is, I can remember. I can take the right effort. I can take a deep breath, oxygenate the body, and come out of it. And come back to the here now. That no matter how tough the situation is, no matter how, and basically, it's never about the situation. It's always about what kind of woeful state the mind has dropped into, which you could call it what kind of hindrance or what kind of obstruction that the mind has. And so no matter how obstructed the mind is, we can remember to come out, to be here now, to see the situation as it really is, and to recognize that probably most of the danger of this situation was manufactured in my own mind, that it wasn't actually all of that dangerous.
So basically, this breathing is just to escape any situation that troubles you. So you can escape. It seems like an escape route for
Yes,
for
right.
your.
It's the escape route out of hell. Right, hell has a back door.
Okay. It seems like you can. One of the issues that I have with that is that you can begin to become detached from the world around you, which
Congratulations if you can do that. Please get yourself detached.
uh, and that is
No,
what
just
in my head I'm not entirely sure if that's the. Do you think that's the best idea? Completely detach yourself from the world.
or stay handcuffed to it. The world is like a ball and chain.
Well,
Are you?
can I hold the hand instead of being chained? I want to just romantically hold hands with the world instead of being chained.
All right, but even in a romantically holding the hand, you don't hold the hand of that girl or other body parts all the time. You can let go.
Right.
And then you can come back and enjoy it. But if you were stuck into it, when you don't want to be into it, when you don't want to lovingly hold it, you've been in the Catholic Church far too long.
I was gonna be a priest. I was ready to be a priest. I was ready to get the vows. I was ready to do that, to preach and praise Jesus for sure. But now it's a different story.
Well, may you wake up to see the reality of the situation so that the very people that you wanted to help before, you can actually give them some help. You can keep them out of hell.
And by hell you mean
Hell states.
life that is not pleasant.
When people are being reborn, they're being reborn into one of the woeful states, the hell worlds, the states of bad feelings, emotions, emotions like fear.
Do you mean reborn in which reborn as in reincarnation or reborn as in during life, but just as like a figurative speech?
Let us put it this way: nobody, no one, no one who has ever lived, no one who's ever written a book, no one who's ever preached from a pulpit, no one who has ever meditated in a cave for hundreds of years or hours or whatever, knows what happens after death.
Okay.
No one knows.
Okay.
And because no one knows what happens after death, no one knows what is the right way to prepare for being dead. But we certainly know how to prepare to die.
Okay.
But nobody prepares correctly to die. They prepare instead to manage after you're dead, and yet nobody knows what it is, and so there's all this kind of doubt. What we're working with is a way of living one's life to be free from doubt and not worry about the next life. And in fact, whatever that next life is, if you can manage this one joyfully, you can manage that one joyfully too.
But then what are you referring to when you were talking about reincarnation then?
Rebirth. I did not use the word
Rebirth. I'm
reincarnate.
sorry.
Yes.
Rebirths. Is it like every day we become, or every time that you
Let us say it this way. There are two different levels that we can talk about. One would be the level of what happens moment by moment. And the other one is one that happens when we have something like a change of lineage or a complete change in the way that we live. Like Jesus said, you must be reborn. And what he means that way is to be reborn into the noble life, to come out of ordinary existence.
So like insight. How about?
Yeah, that's the path. Yes.
Okay.
In other words, when you and that insight is basically when you're in hell and you locate that back door. That's insight.
And that's when you get reborn.
And well, that's when you escape from hell, and that's the rebirth, being reborn.
So you can be reborn like 100 times a day, basically.
Right. If you can remember 100 times a day, and if you follow my instructions, you will do that 100 times a day. And I'll show you and teach you how to do that.
I am learning how to smile whenever I breathe, and I think that helps with the being happy part.
Well, yes, exactly so. Smiling and laughing is joyful.
Fair enough.
And it's a skill to be developed. Not necessarily the smile, because many people, especially for photographs and politicians, they smile when they don't feel like smiling at all, but they do it because the occasion requires it.
But sometimes, well, that's more posing, but what if you smile and that smile, do you think that you can bring happiness if you smile versus like you smile and then you're happy, as opposed to being happy and then smile?
Let us talk about it this way, that one's the tail and the other one is the dog. And it really doesn't matter whether the dog wags his tail or the tail wags the dog.
Okay.
They're connected.
Fair enough.
They're connected. They're deeply wired like that. That's why when you're happy, you do smile. And not only that, but if you have a technique, and I use that with my family, I can use it with my 6-year-old daughter. I can use it with other members of the family, but she's the one that needs it most. And I can tease her right out of whatever bad feelings. And normally her bad feelings, she's angry at mom because mom won't give her what she wants. And then I can tease her, ha, 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 kitty, moho. Moho is actually the Thai word for angry. So kitty is angry, ha, 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 ha. And with that big smile, I say, oh, I bet kitty is about to smile. And then that's when it, and this is actually all very hypnotic suggestions. And then I'll start to tease. I see you smiling. You're actually smiling right now. And because now I'm getting her mentally focused on smiling and hiding that smile because she wants to maintain the anger. But by releasing and allowing the smile out, that's the same thing as letting go of the anger. Like I said, which wags the dog? I mean, does the dog wag the tail or the tail wag the dog? In this case, the tail is wagging the dog. because I didn't talk about it in the sense of, but most people, when they have a child who is angry and throwing a tantrum, I mean, at the various age levels, each child has different kind of tantrums. Adults throw tantrums all the time, and we can be teased out of our tantrums.
Interesting. So do you think that only happens with kids though? Can you do that with adults?
I just said so. I just said that.
Okay.
I've been doing that same technique on you several times now. I just
Interesting.
did it again.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yes, we can influence each other quite a lot. So let's talk about that reborn, and then we'll look about in the sense of how we interact. But first, I want to cover this for you because it's classical in Hinduism that there are various states of reincarnation, and the Buddha turned those things upside down. There is the being reborn in hell. Neko Nekoka or something like that is the Pali word for it. I know the Thai word, but I've forgotten the Pali. Then there is the woeful state of ghost, the hungry ghost that are apparitions. The third is animal states. And the fourth one is heavenly worlds, or the fifth is to be reborn as a human. But the
Mm-hmm.
way that the Buddha talks about this is that the human state, the Manu, is the state that we want to stay in general. That's the place to be. We do not want to be reborn into these hell states. Now, hell is normally referred to as a hot place, and the way that a human becomes hot is with anger and with deep hatred or with anxiety. So, anxiety and anger would be the hell states. And then the hungry ghost is it's actually depicted as looking like a balloon, but it's actually a big pot with a very, very small mouth, sort of like a hypodermic needle, in the sense that you've got a big volume of the tube for the hypodermic. But to draw blood through the needle, that needle is very, very tiny little hole. And so it takes quite a lot of time to draw the blood through that tiny little needle. So this is the idea then that the hungry ghost is one who really is hungry and wants to be filled, but he has not a mouth big enough to feed his hunger. And so he's constantly sucking. And so when you think of life sucks, well, the reason that life sucks is because you're the one who's doing the sucking. You want something that you can't have. And that's one of the classic definitions of a woeful state. Is a classic definition of dukkha. Unsatisfactory is when we want something right now and we cannot have it right now. And that's one of the reasons why we plan and live into the future. We're planning on how to open a hole so that we can get filled with what we want. So that's the second one. It's a state of longing, it's a state of desire, it's a state of clinging. And this is the Pali word is pita. It is sucking on stuff. Oh, I just want more and more. Now, the third kind is the animal state. If you look at a draft animals do what they're told to do. They may not like it, but they do it. We train our children that way. We train our children to do what they're told to do, whether you like it or not. Now, a good nanny, in fact, will try to talk the child into wanting to do it because that's a much easier and is much more healthy for the child, is to trick them into wanting to do it. An example of that is Tom Sawyer gets Huckleberry Finn to paint the fence. Do you know that story?
No.
You
So
should read Mark Twain.
I should read a lot of things. Yeah.
You've been too busy reading Catholic liturgy. All
A
right.
little
So
bit.
Tom Sawyer uh, had the job of painting the fence, but when his friend came by, Huckleberry Finn, Tom started to whistle and he said, "Wow, this is a lot of fun." And then he said, "Hey, you want to help?" And Huck said, "Yeah, sure, I'll start painting too. I like this." And when Tom saw that Huck was really getting into it, he put his brush down and took a hike.
And then Huck just stayed there painting?
Right. That's the right way to do it. The fence got painted. Huck was enjoying himself and everything was copacetic. No problem. But we don't train our children that way. We train our children to do what they're told to do and don't like it. In other words, if Huck had been ordered by Tom to paint the fence, he would have rebelled.
I fundamentally agree with that particular
Okay,
situation.
so let's continue on then. Well, the point is that we get stuck in woeful states of being an animal. We're stupid. We vote because we're tricked into voting. And how we vote is based upon emotion, generally, rather than wisely thinking things through. That's especially true for Republicans. The whole Republican message is to get them unhappy, get them angry, get them in woeful states, and so they'll go along to get along. In fact, that's another definition of it right there, is that we go along to get along because we got this social system that's basically down at the level of instinct. And when we fall into that of going along to getting along, then that's a woeful state. We don't like that. That's a kind of a jail or a kind of prison. Actually, this is a prison paddy wagon that we're being taken someplace against our will. We're being kidnapped, literally. We're becoming donkeys. We're doing what we're told to do, and we don't like it. And so that's the third kind of woeful state. The fourth kind of woeful state, which is normally referred to as heaven, is actually the Pali word for it is Ashura. The Ashura is actually similar to the Titans. For instance, the word Titanic. And the Titans, like the Asuras, are kind of warrior gods. And so the Asuras, if you look at the word sure, you can see that ashore means that they're not sure, that this state of heaven is actually a state of fear, of going into battle, a state of fear of being killed, a state of fear of loss. And so these are the four woeful states: states of anger and agitation, worry, which is a hell state. We have the state of longing and wanting. We have the state of doing what we're told to do, going along to getting along. And by the way, in the way that most adult humans in the West live, is that argument or that order or do this is actually not coming from the outside person telling you to do this. It comes from the inside. It's the old programming that we've set up from childhood. And then the fourth one is the states of danger, the state of being afraid, the state of great trepidation. So let's go back to that longing, or let us know going along to getting along. Sigmund Freud had a system no matter whether they think of it as, some back in the 70s, Freud was getting pretty roundly trashed. I don't know if he's gotten his status back or not, but he did come up with several things that were really, really beautiful and worthwhile. One was his concept of ego states, and the other one was his work with developmental psychology. Now, in the ego states, he has an ego, a superego, and an id. Eric Berne changed the words around to make them more understandable. The ego is actually the adult, that which the human part of our brain. And then we have the parent, which is the superego, and that's where we store all of our woulds, shoulds, oughtas, rules, references, preferences, etc., like that. This stuff is all stored, and it's stored as concepts. And it's also stored as language. And then we have the third kind, which is more associated with the reptilian brain in the back part of the head, and that's called the id, that Berne referred to as the child. The child ego state is the one who is ordered to go along to get along, and the orders are coming from the parent. And so most people spend a whole lot of their time in a dialogue between, you should do this, I don't wanna. You should go on a diet, I don't wanna. You should get some exercise, I don't wanna. And so you have this constant conversation between the superego and the id, and the ego, the frontal cortex, the part that needs the oxygen that can wake up to this crap, this monstrous dialogue that we have going on in our brain between what we should do and the way we feel about it. And so we can come out of that if we can remember to come out of it. And how we remember to come out of it is called sati, to remember, hey, I don't have to be in any of these woeful states. I don't have to be reborn into this crap. I can be happy and joyful instead. That's my choice. And that's basically the way of looking at it. I would rather have my ruthers than have my habits. But most people never make that choice. Habits. That people would rather have their ruthers than have their habits, but they have their habits instead of getting what they would really like to do. They would really like to be happy, joyful, carefree, free from the world. Now, going back to the worlds that you were talking about before, when I'm talking about the world, I'm talking about the superego or the parent ego state. Not talking about the real physical world. And that ego state, this super ego, or the parent ego state, is actually what most humans are operating under most of the time, and that's what we call society. Society is all the rites, rituals, procedures, norms, rituals, etc. There's both little rituals and big rituals. Catholics do big rituals, but hi, how you doing is a little ritual. In other words, if two people come together, they have to have an exchange of pleasantry, like the word hello. That's just a tiny little ritual. Hi, how are you? How's it going? These are little rituals that we have that we can call icebreakers. And that what that means is that this is stuff coming out of the superego state to set the child at ease. But most of the stuff that comes out of the superego pisses the child off. The child does not want to do what he's told to do. And so if we can be in adult ego state, then the adult can say, wait a minute, you two chill out. I'm the boss here now. I'm the lion. I'm the one who runs the show. And so this is a way of looking at the world, is that we look at the world um, as what's really happening right now, rather than looking at the world through the lenses of the conversations and dialogues that we have on the inside of the mind between the superego and the child. And basically what that means is that we begin to no longer listen to the superego. We knew, because almost all of the stuff from the superego is coming out of the past. That superego, by the way, in the suttas, is referred to as sankhara, the old built-up junk, the crap, and that our job as noble dudes, Dhamma dudes, is to stay out of those woeful states by remembering as we're going into them, either remembering to go as we're going into them so that we don't, or the other possibility is that we see that we're in it. We can catch ourselves in it, and then we can come out of it, and we can come out of it skillfully. Here's an example of seeing it when you're in it. Is the husband and wife are having an argument, and then the husband recognizes that he said something, he's gone too far. His wife is beginning to cry or something like that, and so he slams the door on his way out. I've had enough of this. And so that's actually a wake-up call. It's very, very late in the game, but I'm really glad that he did wake up, at least then, because the only other option is to go deeper and deeper, and it may go into domestic violence. So the sooner we can wake up to what's happening in the moment, the sooner we can recognize that we've gotten ourselves into a woeful state, or that we're in a state of emotion, we're in a state of great desire, or we're in a state of anxiety or anger or fear or want, or in a state of resistance, in the sense of going along to get along. Once we can see that we're in one of these states, and we can take a really deep breath, because we remembered that that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a deep breath. We're going to say, wow, I'm glad that I don't have to feel that way. Wow, I'm glad that I can come out of that. That's step 10 right there of Anapanasati, gladdening the mind, saying, well, I don't have to do this. So possibly the most noble thing that the guy could do if he's having an argument with his wife would say, you know, I was wrong about that. I don't have to do that. I really love you, honey, and that I should keep my mouth shut.
Interesting.
But he might, in fact, instead need to take a moment to actually shut his mouth. That would be what I would recommend whenever any of the students recognize that they are angry, because most people, when they're angry, they're in denial. People are angry and everybody knows they're angry. Somebody will even say he's angry and he says, no, I'm not. I'm not angry.
Why do you think that is?
Because we don't like the truth.
Why?
You shall know the truth. The truth shall set you free, but first it will piss you off, because I've got a better, let us say, view or understanding of me, and then I know that anger is wrong, and therefore I'm not angry.
So it's a denial. Okay.
It's denial, precisely. That's exactly right. In fact, it's so much denial that there's a great big river by that name in Egypt.
Okay. Why? So, why do you think that this, out of the four, this is the most pervasive in humanity? You think that this is the doing what you're told to do, is that the most dangerous, or?
I would say possibly so, in the sense that normally when we are in that mode, that we're in fact, in instinctual mode. We're not really doing what is called for in the moment based upon wisdom, but that we're following along with a program that is built in. And that program was built in over time by things that we learn. For instance, most people behave the way that their parents behaved. That even though young men, teenage guys, really don't like their father because they've got attitude problems or, let's say, authority issues. But then when he's 40, he recognizes and starts to wake up, damn, I'm acting just like my dad.
Yeah, that's happening to me. It's horrible.
It is horrible, huh?
I mean, it is horrible to have had complained about it for my entire life and then realizing that you are becoming what you have complained your entire life.
Well, that's wisdom, to wake up. And the further wisdom would be that, and if you are aware of what's going on, you can change it. That's the waking up. That's where all of this particular video got started right from the very beginning. Was when Elizabeth was saying that he was actually able to see that he was in that woeful state and was able to come out of it. And we can do that by seeing, but we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to not be in a state of denial, but rather to see what's going on. And once we can see what's going on, then we can take a deep breath. Or in case of seeing that we're angry, the very first thing that I would recommend is just shut your mouth. Stop talking. Because all we're letting out is a bunch of crap. And if we can shut the mouth and take a few deep breaths, then the thought processes will start to change. But if we continue to talk, we'll continue to be angry and we'll continue to deny that we're angry. We're just trying to make a point. Like this, I'm trying to make a point. And we don't recognize that there's anger built into that. And so by seeing the anger, the first thing to do is to shut the mouth. The second thing to do, take a few deep breaths. Get away from the situation. But that's actually good advice for everything. If you're in a state of anxiety, just sitting at your desk, and you don't even have to hear anything, it's just anxiety comes up. People call it an anxiety attack. And the thing to do is to start breathing. Get some air. Get ourselves out of that woeful state. And here's the next point, and that is that by practicing Anapanasati correctly so that we can get ourselves at a very, very high level that I would call the state of real satisfaction, that if we can have a state of satisfaction, then when anxiety starts, we can catch it really quickly because we want to maintain that state of satisfaction. So we can see that anxiety, or we can see the anger. And so getting ourselves in a state of really nice, pleasant satisfaction, and then being on guard to maintain that state of satisfaction is a way to stay out of being reborn in one of these hell worlds, one of these woeful states. Now, when we talk about reborn, the question is, well, what is reborn? The answer to that is self or selfishness. That we become selfish, and that the selfishness then is seen by the emotions that are there. And this is a state of suffering, or a state of dissatisfaction, or a woeful state. So you have kind of an ordinary state, and the ordinary state, one student has referred to it as just junk thought. In other words, the mind is just doing what it's doing, and there's no problem. Everything is copacetic. But the possibility is that junk thoughts can then take us down or trigger some emotional state.
Wait, so junk thought is not any of worry, longing, is not one of the four woeful states that you were talking about. This is another one.
Right, just musing. The kind of thoughts that we have while we're looking at the internet. And then we'll read something on the internet and all of a sudden we'll start to have emotions about it.
So junk thought.
Junk thoughts. And the reason that they're junk is because they're fleeting. They just pass by. There's nothing much there. But one of the really important qualities of junk thought is that it's susceptible to take us into one of the woeful states. And it's in opposition to high class noble thoughts. High class noble thoughts, let me give you some examples of that. Thoughts about the Four Noble Truths, thoughts about this is what's happening right now, thoughts of wow, this is really great, thoughts of what a marvelous day this is, thoughts of this is what it's like to be free from suffering, thoughts of, oh, it's really a good idea to develop the skills of sati, develop the skills of right view, to have thoughts about right effort, to figure out for yourself what is right effort, to find out for yourself how to come out of the junk thoughts that are actually somewhat victimized or a victim state into very, very high class thoughts, which are very noble, high class, and puts you in the state of being a winner. Like, I can do this. I can stay out of woeful states. These would be high class thoughts, and these are the kinds of thoughts that would be worth having. And we can have those thoughts and continue to have them if we can sustain the mind in a, let us say, state that's fit for work. Now, when the mind is not fit for work, then it will run off into junk thoughts. An example of that is you're reading something, maybe on the screen or a book or something, and while you're reading it, it triggers a thought of something that you read. And as you're reading down through the next paragraph or so, you'll say, wait a minute, the eyes were following the page, but I really wasn't paying attention. I wasn't getting the data off of the page. And we do that a lot. So there's two ways of reading. One is to actually read and pay close attention, knowing that you're getting every sentence, knowing that you understand every paragraph. And when you go into the next paragraph, you know that you've got the basis of what the paragraph that you're just read has. But most people don't read that way. Most people will read and then they'll start to have junk thoughts. The mind has wandered away, and we continue to read, but we're not getting full value out of what we're reading.
Wait, so you said that this is a state of work, that the noble state is a state of work? Or did you say something along those lines?
The noble state is a state of having high quality thoughts, integrated thoughts. To where if we go into one of the woeful states, then that's one of the ways of becoming disintegrated.
But you said something regarding work. Like, is it more work to be like just like brain wise? Do you think it's more work to be in a noble state, and that's why
it takes
people
right
are
effort.
Not...
It takes right effort.
Which means it takes, okay, but it doesn't take any kind of effort to be in a junk state and then migrate directly into a woeful state.
That's how that normally happens. It doesn't take any effort at all. But in fact, if you're going to read something and pay close attention to what you're reading and get everything out of it, that takes effort.
Okay. And so basically the idea is to train your mind so that you're always in an effort. Is that how it is? Because if you want to maintain a noble state,
no, you gosh, right noble effort. When right noble effort is right noble effort. It is the absolute minimal amount of effort to get the job done. That one of the primary problems with Westerners, whether they're doing Buddhist meditation or whatever they're doing, but for meditators who started meditating by reading books, and there's a lot of popular books, they almost invariably wind up working too hard.
Okay.
Struggling, wanting, and that when we that if you're actually very, very curious about what you're reading, then it's not work at all, because the curiosity, the wanting to know, is the thing that keeps you focused on what you're reading off of the page. But if you don't have that curiosity, if you don't have that, but it's like an assignment, like something from your job or employer says, you know, this is your thing to do now, go learn this or whatever. Now we have to actually have to put some effort into it until we begin to like it. And so that's going back to that. If you like what you're reading, if you're curious about it, then it's not so much work. The work is doing something that you were told to do, and so you do it begrudgingly. That's a woeful state. And that's when the junk thoughts will come in and making it very difficult to read, because we don't stay focused, because we don't like it. We're doing what we were told to do. But when we can remember and take a deep breath and say, all right, I'm either going to read this or I'm going to go do something else and put it away. I can just click on that little X or whatever like that, and that page just disappears, and I'm finished with it. Wow. Boy, I'm glad I'm out of that.
Okay.
Or if I am going to read it, then I need to pay close attention, and I should like it. I expect to get some value from it. And so if I see no value coming in it, then there's no reason to continue to read. Now, that's true about anything, not just reading, but it's worthy of what's worthy of your attention.
But what you're saying is that basically we should never do what we're being told to do.
I hear you use words all the time, grandiose words that have to do with future. You just used another one.
Never. Yes, I know. Okay. Fair enough. So,
In this moment, if you can remember, is the better way to look at it.
at this moment,
At this moment,
I can.
always stay in the present moment. It's everything about the present moment. But you have gotten so indoctrinated into past and future that it invades your language.
And do you think that language dictates mental processes, right?
Pardon?
So it is, and language is dictating my mental processes, and that's why you're or I am bound by those things.
Well, you use the word process, and I would use the word perception. But perception is the process, but it's basically what um, what data are you processing? Are you processing here now data, or are you processing old memory data? You're processing using the wants, the shoulda, couldas, oughtas, wouldas, the super ego, the way that you were told to do things. And so a lot of people that you've talked to over your lifespan is looking at it from the very, very long term, like forever and always and nevers. This is highly, highly Christian.
So going back to the example of reading a book, let's say I'm at work. I have to do this task. I can like it, like I can like it, get into it, take interest in it, but I can't stop doing it. Like that second choice, I don't see it. Like you said, if you're reading something, you can just click the X and you can leave. But at a job, you can't really do that second thing, right? Well,
People do it all the time. They get up and go to the bathroom, and by going to the bathroom, see, when we're reading something that we don't like to read, one of the things we do through that resistance of the child ego state is we stop breathing.
yeah,
And then we have symptoms like getting tired, getting bored. And so if the guy who is in that state can get up and go take a hike, go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, come back, then he may be in better mood to read it.
Interesting.
okay.
Or he can just sit there at his desk and take get his mind away from the computer or whatever, and just sit and close his eyes and just relax and enjoy the moment, and then come back and read it. Then, in
Or you
fact,
can.
while he's relaxing, enjoying the moment, and taking a few deep breaths, he's actually mentally preparing himself for the task of doing the reading that he needs. So he can begin to think about what he needs to read, in the sense of what do I expect? What am I curious about? What am I interested in?
All right.
And so taking a short break is possibly a whole lot better. Let us say that in a period of 10 minutes, the first minute you spend in that state, and then you figure out you don't like it. So minute number 2 and 3, you take a break. And then starting at minute 4, you spend 6 good minutes in it, because you remembered to take a little break. However, if you just start into it and then you say, well, I've got to do this, then you'll spend 10 minutes and you won't get so much out of it.
And you'll be miserable. So
And miserable for that 10 minutes rather than joyful.
yeah.
It really is all about attitude. And that's why attitude is that second item on the Eightfold Noble Path. But that second item, attitude, is based upon right view. If we don't have right view, then we'll never develop right attitude. That's why right view comes first. And there's so many different ways of looking at right view. I can give you hundreds and hundreds of examples. Like, it's better to shut up than it is to argue. That's right view. It is better to take a deep breath and enjoy the moment than it is to be frustrated. So it's actually then, it's better if let us say, when the student first sits down to meditate and he's been told that it's mindfulness of breathing, then when the mind wanders away, when he remembers that the mind has wandered away, that has to have the right view, that it's better to have the mind back on the breath than it is to let it wander. And yet many students will just sit there, let their mind wander away, because they haven't picked up the right view, that it's better to pay attention to this present moment rather than let the mind wander away into what we call junk thought.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we sit on the floor wandering away with junk thought, we'll get bored, we'll get unhappy, we'll fill up with anxiety, and the next thing you know, we've been reborn in one of these hell states, one of these woeful states. But if we can remember right view, that is, I'm going to watch my breath. I'm going to sit here and enjoy this moment. This is going to be good stuff. When you have that attitude, you see that attitude comes from that right view. And so right view, right sati, to remember, right effort, just the very basic amount of effort to bring you into right attitude. It's just an attitude change. It takes probably more effort to take a deep breath than it does to change the attitude. An example of that, for instance, with Kitty, this is what happened yesterday or the day before. She's actually getting into doing some household duties. And so she actually got a cup of coffee for me. And the coffee is in little packets. And she put 4 of those packets into the cup. And when Mom caught that she had done 4 packages, because Kitty had already brought the cup out here, but Mom wouldn't let me drink it. She says, Kitty had put 4 packets in there. And so Kitty is beginning to feel bad. And I said, wow, thank you, Kitty. You must really care about me. You know I like coffee, so 4 packets of coffee should taste 4 times as good as 1 packet. Is that what you were thinking? She said, yeah. Okay, so Mom and Kitty had gotten themselves into a woeful state because of the coffee. It wasn't very woeful, but it was going in that direction. And I pulled her right out of it just by saying, you were just trying to do a really good thing. Thank you, Kitty. You're staying so thoughtful, but really that's too much. Just 1 packet will do. Well, next time you can do just 1 packet, okay? And so this is a way of looking at it, that we don't have to go into those woeful states if we can remember to pop right out of it. So this is one's right attitude. The right attitude is that we don't have to create any trouble at all. That every situation is just a situation. The trouble is made by going into an emotional state about it. We have feelings about it. Feelings of fear, anxiety, anger, sadness, etc.
But I feel like whenever you're mentioning that any emotion, so you're saying that any emotional state is a woeful state,
as opposed to being a joyful state.
but wouldn't you consider a joyful state also an emotional state?
Well, now we're just quibbling over the definition of the word emotion.
Okay. I mean, it's no. Well, the thing about it is that in my head, whenever you say emotion, it just basically it is saying that any emotion, to me, the message that I'm getting is that any emotional state is negative, and so the
Let us say not negative. Let's use the word not satisfactory.
not satisfactory.
Let's stay with the word satisfactory.
Okay.
Are you satisfied with the way things are right now?
And you're saying that emotional states tend to be unsatisfactory.
They are, on definition, unsatisfactory. That's why I'm calling them woeful states. It's because they're unsatisfactory.
But there are other emotions that are positive, that are satisfactory.
Okay, so get yourself into them and stop quibbling with me about it.
Okay.
You just did. He just did that. You see that?
Okay.
And this is why sati is so important, is to wake up, to remember that I don't have to be in a state of unsatisfactory. I can be in a state of satisfaction.
Sati.
We can make everything into a win. Even your own death can be a state where we win. Why do we have to be losers? Because we were trained to be losers when we were kids, and we were too stupid then to realize that just because everybody else is going around in a state of losing, I have to lose too. But you don't have to lose. You can be a winner all the time. If you can remember. And if you know how to experience these states. So this is part of the training. There's numbers of skills to be developed. The primary skill is the skill of sati. The number one overriding most important skill is the skill of right view. Right effort is the skill that is almost always applied as either not enough or too much, but it takes just the right balance. And so that needs to be experimented with. It needs to be a skill to be developed of one's right effort. And that when it's fully developed correctly, it's no longer effort. Now it's energy. As soon as we remember, it's just takes no effort at all to take that deep breath. It just pops up. And that's one's right effort, is when it becomes quite skillful. It's actually energetic. And so these four things run and circle around each other. And the outcome then is the noble right attitude. And that noble attitude is the attitude of being on top of the world. The example that I hear is that everyone is an emperor of their own pile of dirt. The question is, are you going to be buried under your own pile of dirt? Are you going to be clawing your way out of it? Are you going to sit happily on top of your own pile of dirt? That's the winner. That's the lion. That's the successful one. And that's a skill that has to be developed. Is, can you develop success directly? Because most people can't. Most people are in business because they want to be successful. People do business deals. They want to be successful. People do dating services. They want to be successful. Everything is based upon this idea of success. When you're a salesman, the success is selling that car. And for like a real estate agent who's worked on a real estate deal for months and months, and finally she gets both the buyer and the seller to put their signatures on that paper, and that real estate agent will grab that page. Success! I got it finally. I don't even have the paycheck yet, but I feel that feeling of success. But that success feeling is something that can be developed on the inside. It's not a gift that comes from the outside. Just because two people signed a piece of paper doesn't mean anything to most people. But for that real estate agent, it meant great success. She'd been working on that for a while. But what she doesn't realize is she could have had that feeling of success months before that if she had only practiced feeling successful. That feeling of success, that great feeling of success, is actually step 5 of Anapanasati. When I say steps, this is not steps like marching, like step 1, then you take step 2, and then step 3 or step 4. It's much more like a tango or ballet, where you jump from step 1 to 16, and then you leap back in the air of step 4 and whatnot like that. And so it's actually not steps, it's or even stages, but it's just aspects. And so even though Anapanasati has 16 aspects, people do not practice them like step 1, and then a year later step 2, and then a later step 6 or whatever like that. That in fact, that would be like practicing music, going to piano lessons, and the student for the first year of piano lessons, she can only play the note C. And then in the second year, she plays both C and D. And then in the third year, they can play 3 notes. No, that's not the way that anybody ever learns the piano. No, you have to be able to play all of the notes, but you have to learn to play them together in skill. So this is the way that we practice Anapanasati. And the practice of Anapanasati then builds factors together. And when we have all of the factors together, collected together, then that is what is called the first jhana. That first jhana then is that state that I mentioned earlier was the state of success. And it has the quality of winning. Step 5 is, in the Pali, is called piti, and what it means is filled with joy, but the joy is of success. So it's a skill to be developed. directly. That you just feel successful, not because you've done something and been successful at doing, but you are cultivating the feeling of success. You cultivate the feeling of satisfaction. You cultivate the feelings of gladdening the mind and experiencing the mind. And so by doing this, we're throwing the hindrances or the junk thoughts and all of that out of the mind, and then we're free from that stuff. And so we feel successful at being free from it. And then we feel satisfied that we're free from it. And so now we're getting jhana factors. When we add the breath in there, then that's what gives us the energy to feel really successful. So we now also are getting the mind ready for work so that we can apply it and keep it applied on what we want to do. Like now, what we want to do is to feel really successful. Now we have all the jhana factors together. Seclusion from the hindrances, liking that we're secluded from the hindrances, satisfied that we're free from the hindrances, wanting to stay in that state of satisfaction. So we apply the mind to wholesome thoughts and only allow wholesome thoughts in. So this is a higher stage. This is actually very close to being noble. The noble mind is a mind that's in this thing called first jhana. Now, the higher jhanas are not necessary, and we don't need to talk too much about them, though I've got students who do experience those things, and then we talk about them. But the most important thing is that can you feel really satisfied? Can you feel really successful? If not, why don't you take a deep breath and say, oh, okay, I feel successful. And start practicing that over and over and over and over again. Because that, your only option is either junk thoughts or woeful states. And this is where we spend most of our lives. We either spend our lives in junk thought or woeful states. But there is a way of spending our time in high quality states. Call them emotions if you want to, positive emotions. The kind of emotions that we have very rarely. The children, they love to play. So why not play with kids? They're really wonderful to play with. But instead, we would rather train them, take them out of their play. All right. So what we're really saying is that we're going to regain our childhood. We're going to regain our joy of living. We're going to regain our curiosity. And we're going to use the best part of the brain to do that. And that best part of the brain requires some oxygen. So this is why breathing is so important. And so this is the way of practice in a nutshell. And when you see this in operation, now you gain confidence in it. So that's the difference between the two of you right now is that after you've actually done this, you can actually see it in operation. For John, it's still conceptual. But if you start practicing it,
I don't. I mean, I was able to remember. I mean, a handful of times a day, but I don't. I argue a lot, as you can tell.
I know. We'll cure you of that soon enough.
And you just. I don't. But I don't think it's. But it's curiosity. It's not. I don't think that it is. I don't find it unpleasant. It is just arguing is just the way that I express my curiosity, I guess. But it's not arguing; it's just questions.
All right.
I think so.
Questions are wonderful. Arguing is not pleasant for the one who is doing it.
I think now we're arguing again about arguing. No, I think it can. It is an expression of curiosity, which you mentioned it was good. It is energizing, and it is chasing the truth, which is what we want, right? So I think arguing can potentially be good if it's not emotional, if it's just it's a joyful argument.
Okay. All right. I'll tell you something that's a little better than that. And
Okay.
that is experiencing it rather than arguing about it. Actually going and doing it so that you can see it for yourself rather than making me use your language.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, this the practicing of just being successful and feeling happy. It makes a lot of sense because
Well, let's take it out of making a lot of sense in the sense that it's a concept that's sensing and start doing it.
it's hard. and and I don't feel successful
That's
now. I
because you're too
know.
busy
Oh,
arguing with yourself over it.
yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it's true. It's the other day I it was Friday and I finished everything that I had to do for the week, and even then I was still not feeling accomplished. And then I realized that, as you mentioned, success or defeat or whatever, it doesn't come from the exterior. It comes from the interior. Regardless of what I had done that day, I still felt unsuccessful. And that's when I realized this is bullshit. I did everything that I had to do. Why the fuck am I not feeling successful right now? And this kind of like seals the deal. You have Because I don't practice feeling successful. I don't practice feeling accomplished. I practice being unaccomplished and unsuccessful and
I
overwhelmed.
know. I know. I'm glad you do. I'm glad you're figuring that out. I can see already.
Yeah, I think I have to conceptualize it in order to practice it.
Right. Well, now you need that. Now that you've got the concepts down good enough, stop conceptualizing it and start remembering it. So sit down and start watching the breath, start taking a few breaths, and then you'll recognize all the mind's wandered away. Never mind, come back and start again. So that you start to develop that skill of sati. You have to keep remembering. The only way to keep remembering is by practicing it over and over again to keep watching the breath. And as you're watching the breath, you want to start controlling the breath because the normal state will be when you're not watching the breath that it goes back down to a normal state. When you're watching the breath, that means that you're elevating it and getting a little more air. How long can you do that? 1 minute, 2 minutes, and then you forget. And when you forget, the next thing you need to do is now you remember. And then you start it again. And how long can you watch the breath again? 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and then you forget.
So at any given moment, you have to be on the breath. That is the idea, to be on the breath at any given moment.
I wouldn't say any given moment. I'd say do it right now.
Okay.
Because that any given moment is this given moment. This is the one that we're given.
Well,
This is the one that exists. And this moment has lasted from before the planet Earth formalized. When it was formalizing, when it was a bug ball of goo or whatever, it was when that happened. It was right then, right now.
but how do you pay attention to the breath at the same? For example, right now, that how do I pay attention to the breath as I'm paying attention to you?
Well, I'm doing it. Don't you see me breathing?
Yeah, but you mentioned it's different forgetting and breathing and then doing something else versus focusing on the breath and getting
It's a
all the breath.
skill to be developed. Keep figuring that out. It's a skill. to be developed, which means you have to keep practicing and practicing and practicing.
Okay.
And whenever you forget, say, never mind, start again. Never mind, start again. Come out of whatever state you were in and come into a state you would like to be in. And maintain it. And then you'll forget. And the mind will wander away again. And every time you remember, that sati, a skill to be developed. And every time that you decide, oh, now that I'm awake, I'm going to start watching the breath. That's one's right view. And then you say, oh, I can do this. And that's one's right attitude. And how did you do that? Well, it was right effort. The right effort is that I'm going to do this. I'm going to take a deep breath and I'm going to watch my breath. And I can continue talking with people. There's a whole lot of stuff that can be done. I mean, a breath takes quite a while. The mind is fast. The mind can do a whole lot of stuff during one breath. The question is, what is it going to be doing? Is it going to be joyful? Or is it going to be arguing? Because when you argue, you normally forget that when people are arguing, they kind of shut down. So that's the practice. That's why people sit on the floor with a timer and do all of these kind of practices, is to develop sati, to remember, to remember, to remember.
So what is the difference between anapanasati and just sati?
Anapanasati, anapana means breathing in and out. It's the same word as pranayana.
Okay.
To remember to take the deep breath.
Oh, so anapanasati is just sati of the breath, mindfulness of the breath. And then sati is just mindfulness in general.
Right. And we use the breath as the anchor to get started because there's a lot of stuff to remember. To remember to look, to remember to investigate, to remember to be joyful, to remember to be successful, to remember to be satisfied. These are all things to be remembered, but the first thing that we work with is the breath because that's the easiest one to remember.
I mean, yes, I guess.
Yes. So now that you know that it makes perfect sense, go do this thing. Go practice.
I am practicing at this moment.
Great. Excellent. Well, this has been quite a time. I've enjoyed this conversation.
Good. I have
Is there
enjoyed
anything
it
else?
too.
Do you think there's anything else we need to do now before we finish?
So just to recap, you do right view, and then it's better to shut up, better to be on the breath and not be mind wandering. And then right view helps you develop right effort. But the right effort has to be, it's a balance between not too much and not too little, and just the right so that you develop right attitude. Is that how it is? And
yes.
then once you have the right attitude, then you don't
need anything else. You're good to go. You get the right attitude, and that's it.
You own your pile of dirt. You're
the champion. You are, in fact, the emperor rather than something buried.
Got it. Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yes, it is. And it's so easy. And that's why Buddhism as religion is so screwed up.
Why?
It's because people don't practice this simple system. Mm-hmm. They get wrapped up into all kinds of philosophical this, that's, and the other things because they learned how to do that from Christianity. And this is really simple. And there are so many ways to make it sound very simple. The one that I've used for many years is, don't worry, be happy. And that sums up the entire teaching of the Buddha. The Buddha used dukkha, dukkha nirodha. That's what he said, that I only teach one thing. both formerly and now, I teach only one thing, dukkha, dukkha nirodha. And that meant something to the people then, but that Pali phrase doesn't mean anything now, but you can find a phrase that fits you. Ashley came up with his own phrase, and he loves it, and so I'll share it with you. And his is, get happy, stay happy. Goenka had his, never mind, start again.
Okay.
Or you could just say ta-ta-ta. That's another way to say it, which is, this is it.
A shot. Dukkha. Dukkha nirodha.
Don't worry, be happy. Don't worry is the dukkha. Don't worry, get rid of it. Be happy. Be joyful. Crack a smile. Crack a joke. Crack open this moment. So, you got any final questions?
I am fine.
Great. Because this is getting to be a very long one now. This is going an hour and a half, so.
Yeah. No, it's great. This works very well.
Excellent, excellent. So go remember to be happy.
I will do it right now.
Excellent. All right, guys. We'll see you.
Yeah, bye.